And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is June the 23rd, 174th day of this year. Just 191 days remain to the year's over with, and we'll start a new one. It's International Olympic Day. Commemorates the founding of the International Olympic Committee on June 23rd, 1894. United Nations Public Service Day recognizes the value of public service to communities and honors the contribution of public servants. International Widows Day, Global UN Awareness Day, addressing the human rights violations and poverty faced by widows around the world. On this day in 1814, the Battle of Bannockburn took place, resulting in a decisive victory for the Scots under Robert the Bruce over the English. And in 1865, Cherokee Chief and Confederate General Stand Watie surrendered in the American Civil War. It marked the end of major hostilities, though there were, over the next few years, quite a number of I guess you could call them uprisings. With the war over, they just became crimes as opposed to Confederate activity. All right, let's see what stories we have in the news, because there's always something going on. President Trump sounds off after 39 shot and multiple killed in a bloody weekend in Chicago, of all places. It's being called a bloodbath. President Trump touts D.C.-style cleanup where National Guard stepped in. Violent, deadly weekend in Chicago caught the attention of President Trump. 6 people were killed and 39 were shot in a series of shootings in the Windy City over the weekend. Mass drive-by shooting in Chicago's Princeton Park neighborhood resulted in 13 people injured Friday night. Chicago police say an SUV drove up on a crowd of people and 2 suspects opened fire on multiple victims. Offenders from inside the vehicle began firing gunshots toward the crowd before fleeing the scene. Multiple victims sustained gunshot wounds and were transported to local hospitals. In a post to X responding to the drive-by shooting, Chicago Mayor Brendan Johnson said, I'm heartbroken by the violence in Princeton Park last night. We should have been a night of celebration and community reflection, for Juneteenth was shattered by a horrific act of violence. My thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their loved ones. He says that, but at the same time, he totally opposes National Guard coming in to restore order. Go figure. Well, Connecticut dad jumped to his death during a concert at Madison Square Garden in New York City. A man jumped to his death at a concert over the weekend at the Madison Square Garden. Witnesses telling authorities he appeared to be intoxicated, according to a report. Paul Cooker, 51, a father of 2, was celebrating his 25th wedding anniversary with his wife at Saturday's Goose concert, when he was captured on video falling headfirst from a balcony on the 300s section and landed on the concert goers down below. He appeared to be intoxicated and under the influence before going over the 4-foot glass barrier short before 10 p.m., according to law enforcement. The man was unconscious and unresponsive after hitting the ground, according to police. He was then rushed to a Bellevue hospital and was pronounced dead. Several people who landed on suffered minor injuries, other sources told the outlet. His wife was near their assigned seats 3 sections away when the incident occurred, according to sources. She was unaware of what happened to her husband until she was notified by authorities, according to the report. She thought he had taken a bathroom break. A little long coming back, but go figure. New York City's medical examiner's office said yesterday that the cause of his death remains under investigation. As part of the probe into the incident, the medical examiner said it was conducting a toxicology report. Was he stoned? Drunk? What was the story? Well, the Charlie Kirk assassination suspect's lawyers mirrored the notorious killer's tactical delay strategy, according to a former prosecutor. Heather Robinson spent over 9 months dodging a plea in the Charlie Kirk assassination case. The former federal prosecutor says he's following the same playbook as one of the most notorious murderers in recent memory, with one goal in mind. Robinson, who's 23, faces several charges after he allegedly shot and killed conservative icon Kirk at Utah Valley University September 10th, 2025. He's yet to enter a plea, as an arraignment can't be held until the preliminary hearing has been conducted in Utah. The preliminary hearing is scheduled for July 6th through the 10th. Robinson's legal team has flooded the court in motion, successfully delaying the case at every chance they've gotten. Former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani told Fox News that Robinson's defense is running the same playbook as one of the most notorious murderers in recent history, Brian Kohlberger. Had entered the play because the defense is filing a lot of pretrial motions to put the prosecution back on its heels. Things like trying to disqualify the entire Utah County Attorney's Office, trying to get some of the evidence suppressed, trying to get a contempt order because the prosecutors violated the court's gag order. These are the type of things the defense has been doing, trying to get the death penalty off the table. They've really taken a playbook from how the lawyers in Idaho in the Brian Kohlberger case handled that litigation. In Kohlberger's case, he pled guilty in July 2025 to killing Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Morgan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin November 13, 2022. I guess Robinson hopes everybody's going to get fed up and say, okay, fine, go home. Austin Metcalf's father accuses media pundits of trying to monetize his son's death for clicks. Jeff Metcalf, the father of slain 17-year-old Austin Metcalf, accused some pundits of attempting to monetize his son's death and revealed whether convicted killer Carmelo Anthony's family's ever apologized. He said they're looking for their 15 minutes of fame or their clickbait or their clicks. They're just looking to monetize the death of my son, he told the Will Cain Show on Monday. His comments came as newly released evidence paints a clearer picture of the moments leading up to and following the fatal 2025 stabbing death. Police body camera footage from the day of the stabbing shows that when officers referred to Anthony as the alleged suspect while putting him in handcuffs, he replied, "I'm not alleged, I did it," which would seem to me to be a confession, but go figure. Metcalf responded to comments made by The View co-host Sunny Hostin Monday when she said she couldn't understand why Anthony's case wasn't determined to be self-defense. He said, "I really wish I wouldn't speak about it at all because, one, if that woman said that, she had no idea about the facts of the case, but she wants to spew her public opinion on a platform that reaches millions of people every day. And he says she's completely wrong, often to join The View to discuss his son's murder." Well, The View is not known for being fact-related. We'll see what happens. Well, Lindsey Vonn turned heads by her pool. Giselle snubs Tom Brady in a ridiculous fake outrage over U.S. Open fans. Father's Day is in the rearview mirror. Final full week of June's here. Our 250th birthday is on the horizon. So who has it better than we do? Actually, nobody, according to most pundits. America's rolling. Soccer team would actually be good. NFL training camps open 30 days from now, and we just had the longest day of the year. Unfortunately, that means it's all downhill from here, but it's a slow dip. We still have months of sunshine to look forward to, nothing to lose sleep over at the moment. Instead, we press on and keep our collective feet on the pedal. Well, this has been referred to by many as Monday nightcaps, talking about things like Lindsey Vonn taking a break from leg rehab to enjoy some R&R by the pool. The Giselle has disrespected Tom Brady. I'll stop boo-hooing the fans at Shinnecock for being mean to Wyndham Clark. Fake outrage over fans saying not so nice things to professional athletes has been mind-boggling. Well, takes all kinds to make a world, folks. Golf Channel analyst calls Long Island fans staying on the game after the U.S. Open incidents. One analyst has a bone to pick with a specific region of golf fans after the U.S. Open at Shinnecock Hills this past week. Golf Channel's Eamon Lynch believes a major golf major should never come across Long Island, New York again after seeing what unfolded at one of the country's storied courses in Shinnecock Hills during the U.S. Open. He said Long Island golf fans are staying on the game of golf during a segment on Monday after Wyndham Clark's second U.S. Open victory for his career. Lynch continued to unload on Long Islanders who attended the event, saying they don't deserve to see another major at any of the storied courses, including Bethpage Black, which hosted this past year's Ryder Cup. Clark was at the center of Lynch's argument as authorities had to kick patrons at Shinnecock Hills on Sunday out after heckling the U.S. Open's leader. Fans are heard screaming, "Don't choke Wyndham," as well as "Get in the bunker," during his final round. According to Lynch, this isn't a New York problem. It doesn't happen at Winged Foot. It doesn't happen at Arkansas or on the other side of the Hudson. But it happens on Long Island every single time. As of now, the PGA of America has the PGA Championship set up for Bethpage Black in 2033. We'll see if that actually comes to pass. Prominent businessman learns his fate in a boat crash case that killed a teen and crippled another one. Miami real estate developer George Pino is found not guilty in connection with a boat crash off Boca Chica Key in Biscayne Bay in September 2022. That crash killed one teenager and left another with a permanent disability. Verdict was handed down on Monday, acquitting Pino, who is 55, who was charged with second-degree manslaughter and vessel homicide for the crash that killed 17-year-old Lucy Fernandez and left another teen, Katie Puig, now 21, with life-changing injuries. The verdict comes after an emotional 8 days of testimony in South Florida. During closing arguments, prosecutors argued that Pino was reckless when he crashed his boat into a channel marker during Labor Day weekend in 2022. The defense claimed the collision was an accident. Well, Miami-Dade State Attorney Catherine Fernandez Rundle prosecuted the case, said she's disappointed in the verdict but accepted the jury's decision. Well, best laid plans of mice and men, so to speak. President Trump warns Iran if the regime doesn't live up to the deal after following Switzerland's talks, there's going to be repercussions. President Trump said, I'll do what I have to do if the regime doesn't live up to its deal. President Trump on Monday warned that he'd do whatever action he deemed necessary if Iran fails to uphold its commitments amid a new 60-day roadmap agreement after talks in Switzerland. He says if Iran doesn't live up to the agreement, they're not behaving, I'll do what I have to do. The results of the latest negotiations include measures to prevent incidents and miscommunication in the Strait of Hormuz, as well as the creation of a deconfliction cell to help enforce the U.S.-Iran ceasefire agreement across all fronts, including Lebanon, by the way. Vice President Vance also said Monday that Iran agreed to invite in the National Atomic Energy Agency inspectors into the country. Yesterday, Fox News Digital, their live blog, offered additional coverage of the conflict with Iran. So maybe that war is over. We'll see. Well, terrifying scene unfolded as metal cabana frame crashed into a packed casino pool area. Powerful wind gusts sent a metal cabana frame crashing into a crowded pool area at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino on Saturday evening. An incident unfolded at the Dare Club, a rooftop entertainment venue at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Hollywood, Florida. Strong winds struck an outdoor section of the venue, causing the structure to partially collapse. 5 people are taken to Memorial Regional Hospital with 9 life-threatening injuries. Videos shared online show guests and employees racing to help those trapped underneath the fallen structure. Several people lifting sections of the metal frame before the first responders arrived. The cabana frame was lifted by strong winds before crashing into an area occupied by guests near the resort's pool deck. Well, one bystander who recorded the aftermath said he'd been standing near the area moments before the incident occurred. In a social media post, the witness said he walked away shortly before the structure came down and later described feeling shocked by how narrowly he avoided being caught underneath it. Something like that could definitely ruin your afternoon. No question about that. Well, President Trump got a major win against China in an African rare earth metals case. What's being hailed as a major victory for the Trump administration is Chinese domination of the rare earth minerals market. U.S. has supported an American company, Virtus Minerals, developing 2 major mines producing cobalt and copper in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is claimed to be the first U.S. Rare earth minerals acquisition in the African nation since President Trump announced the Washington Accord last December. Historically, China has been the heavy lifter of these metals. Strategic Studies Institute reported 80% of the world's cobalt is produced in the DRC. That's Democratic Republic of the Congo. 80% of that's controlled by China. Cobalt, used in a wide range of applications from electric car and mobile phones to military jets, is on the U.S. government's list of critical minerals. Copper is also on that list, as traditional uses such as piping for plumbing. It's also needed in electronics and automotive industry. Well, Moby continues to have victories. California Exodus 2.0. SpaceX tech IPOs are said to trigger the next massive wealth flight to Florida. Fresh wave of Silicon Valley wealth consumed flow into South Florida, with OpenAI quietly filing for a confidential IPO alongside market debuts from aerospace giant to SpaceX and AI rival Anthropic. Billions of dollars in overnight liquidity about to be unlocked for executives and middle management alike. But instead of reinvesting in the Golden State, this incoming class of newly minted tech multimillionaires already flooding Florida real estate brokers with calls triggered what experts say could be a rapid-fire tech exodus 2.0 measured in months, not years. You can't expect them to hand everything over to the state in the form of taxes, which is exactly what California is expecting. And let's see. SpaceX launches Starfall demo mission from Florida. The Musk is moving for the next achievement. Well, the Democratic Party's distrust of leadership gives rise to a new brand of candidate. They still have not gotten over their love affair with the far left, so we shall see what shall happen. Caitlin Clark torches officials after a Fever star receives a technical foul for clapping. Said that's just ridiculous. Indiana Fever star Caitlin Clark was upset with a technical foul call she got during the team's win over the Phoenix Mercury on Monday night. Made her thoughts known to the public. She involved in an entanglement with Deanna Bonner in the fourth quarter. Called for a foul, but received a technical foul after she clapped her hands. She was seen pleading with officials, asking for an explanation for the technical foul. It was her 5th technical foul of the season. When a player reaches their 8th technical foul, they're suspended for 1 day. She said, "It's ridiculous. I got a technical foul for clapping. So we should all just go on the calendar now and pick a game that I'm going to be suspended for if I'm going to get technicals for clapping." The referee said I got a technical for clapping. If there's any technical that should be taken away, it should be one that's, if it is truly for clapping. That's what they said they gave it to me for. So it's just ridiculous. I don't understand it at all. And I don't think there's a rule in basketball that players can't clap. But apparently, there are new rules being designed just for her. Well, Jackie Kennedy was unimpressed by Buckingham Palace till Queen Elizabeth's advice changed everything, according to an author. Queen Elizabeth II gave Jackie Kennedy a piece of advice that helped ease any awkwardness between the two iconic women. That claim was made by Catherine Hellerman, author of The Kennedys and the Windsors, which explores the two dynasties and how their paths crossed over the years. Hellerman noted, although the two women are hardly kindred spirits when they met, the monarch's words left a lasting mark on the First Lady. There's a great quote that Queen Elizabeth allegedly said to Jackie during the 1961 meeting at Buckingham Palace. Jackie had been talking about how she struggled a bit on a recent visit to Canada, being in the public eye, being in the spotlight all the time. And the Queen said that you learn to save yourself. And I think that interaction between them is quite telling, because at the moment, Jackie was still a new First Lady. She was shining brightly and making such an impact on the global stage. By contrast, Queen Elizabeth had only been queen for several years, but I had known for many years that it would eventually be her future. And according to Hellerman, you learn to save yourself. That's it for the long haul. You can't expend all that energy at once because you have to manage it. And that helps illustrate how the royals have managed fame over the many years they've been in the seat of power. And Hailey Bieber strips down for Kim Kardashian's Skims in a red-hot new campaign. When she stripped down for Skims, she left little to the imagination, serving up a series of sizzling looks for Kim Kardashian's shapewear brand. Bieber starred in a campaign for Everyday Cotton, a new line photographed by Mert Alas. Hailey has a unique ability to make even the simpler pieces feel elevated, according to Kardashian, Kim's Skims co-founder and chief executive officer. That is an executive for you. Her approach to style is effortless, which made her the perfect person to bring everyday cotton to life. Well, we shall see if this company is successful. Well, we've been talking about a lot of interesting topics over the various shows. And for example, yesterday, what really happened to John Wilkes Booth? And how about all that Confederate treasure that vanished at the end of the war? It's never been found. And now there are people that I've known over the years whose goal in life is to support themselves using a metal detector. I did a lot of that, both in the South and in California. Now, at the end of the Civil War, there were a lot of conspiracy groups. One that I've always found fascinating was the Knights of the Golden Circle. A very secretive group, controversial from the start. Supposedly founded on the 4th of July in Lexington, Kentucky by Virginia-born physician George W. Bickley. The Knights are one of the many groups that during the Civil War provided an outlet for the anger that was running rampant in the country. Once admitted to the Knights of the Golden Circle, members had to swear that, or anybody who wasn't a moral and upstanding white male, people are still calling them the precursors to the KKK. In fact, some even say the Knights of the Golden Circle actually became the KKK. Now, the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan was actually founded by Nathan Bedford Forrest, former Confederate general. But the Knights of the Golden Circle's real power was hard to gauge because it existed in the shadows. But the National Archives has collected some of its secrets. But unlike the Freemasons or other secret societies who were focused on long-time traditions, Knights of the Golden Circle wanted something far more hateful. They wanted for the Union to end so they could run their own slave-based society. The goal was to create a true physical golden circle with Mexico and the Caribbean, build a private part of the country where slavery would continue. And if that led to breaking up the Union, well, so be it. Over time, the Knights of the Golden Circle claimed to have many members in northern states as well as throughout the South. But since records and documentation detailing the group's professed purposes were scarce to non-existent, historians still debate whether they truly had any power at all. Regardless, at the height of the war, rumors spread that the Knights of the Golden Circle had penetrated the entire Union. Pennsylvania was said to be overrun with KGC members who were plotting to overthrow the government, capture Washington, D.C., and even kidnap President Lincoln and cut off his head. In fact, depending on who you ask, both John Wilkes Booth and Jesse James were rumored to be KGC members. But finding proof is difficult. In the end, regardless of the scope of their power, the KGC had one thing they were immediately good at, and that's keeping secrets. It was very structured. The KGC was designed to maximize secrecy, organized into groups called castles. These castles are guarded by specially designated sentinels, individuals entrusted with the organization's greatest secret, guarding the Confederacy's hidden treasure, generation to generation over the course of a century. Growing up where I did, I knew a few folks that rumor held were KGC sentinels. I don't know if they were or not. By nature, they were very close-mouthed. Well, there's a lot of so-called KGC codes that can be found across the country. Treasure hunter Bob Brewer had a system for interpreting hidden KGC signs. A bit complicated, to be sure. By complicated, sometimes it can even look a bit crazy. But according to the story, each sign suggests a distance or a heading that leads to the next sign. So a brewer draws a line from sign to sign on a topographical map of the area, and where the signs intersect, he'll either find treasure or he'll find another sign that'll lead him to the next clue. One of the first codes he cracked was on what was called a Bible tree. The trunk of that tree is covered with carvings, spent a lifetime trying to decode them. One of them refers to a specific Bible passage, 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3. Other carvings seem purely symbolic: a cross, a bell, a horse, a bird, and what looks like the random numbers and letters. Now, the KGC actually had its own alphabet. And supposedly, using that alphabet, you could decode some of their symbols. Now, Brewer suspected that each of the 60 carvings on that tree was part of a code for something else. And what he found out was through trial and error. He spent years analyzing the symbols and measuring distances and looking for other nearby signs. But nothing on these trees is what it seems. According to Brewer, KGC were masters of misdirection who intentionally loaded their carvings with false leads. They were betting most treasure hunters would get so frustrated after chasing these bogus clues they'd give up before they ever found anything. But Brewer kept trying. Before long, he had a map full of coordinates that would ultimately lead him to the rebel goal. Some of the other typical symbols and treasure marks include animals. That's a travel symbol, don't you know? When combined with a directional clue, tells you where you ought to be headed. And then there's the picture of a ghost. That means you're looking for a grave. a heart and a letter H, which stands for heart. Some of the numerals represent a distance measure, telling you how far you need to go, or a reference to something you're looking for. For example, the number 8 might send you to a nearby gazebo. Why a gazebo? Well, gazebos have 8 sides. Again, as you can tell, this isn't a simple process. There are hundreds of these symbols, which can produce a near infinite number of combinations and a near infinite number of interpretations. Calls for a special type of mind, don't you know? Analytical, experienced, and some would say somewhat eccentric, which is a nice way to say just crazy as a loon. But in the end, it's a long way from the X marks the spot treasure maps we all dealt with growing up. Well, in regard to Bob Brewer and his treasure hunt for Confederate gold, it wasn't the grave itself that caught his interest. It was misspelling on a tombstone's inscription. Instead of Sailor's Creek, Sayler apostrophe S Creek, the inscription read Sailor, Sailor apostrophe S Creek. Now, it could be a mistake by the stone carver, but to Brewer, the misspelling was a clue that formed an anagram, sailors. And to Brewer, these letters can be rearranged to spell rails so. You might ask what rails so means. It also means, the letters also mean south, as in railroad south, rails to the south. That was right near the grave that he was looking at. The original tracks and railbed was used back then. Railroads that were once real helpful in moving Confederate treasury. And a lot of Confederate gold did disappear at the end of the war, no question about that. Well, to explain some of the symbols, Bob Brewer was interviewed. He's co-author of a book called Rebel Gold that I read once upon a time. He was fortunate that both his grandfather and uncle were skilled in spotting and interpreting KGC signs and learned by carefully watching them when he was young. He said these sentinels had their own private language, a combination of letters and symbols and numerals that, when arranged in certain ways, can provide clandestine communications and point the way to the location of hidden material. In other words, the KGC had its very own language and system for providing what was essentially map coordinates. And they did it in a way that avoided actually using a customary map. And why did they do this? Well, to protect the treasure, of course. If the details were written on a map and the map got stolen, then the treasure would be stolen. With the KGC Sentinel, the Sentinel stands guard and the secret stays safe. The result is that only these so-called Sentinels can decode the hidden symbols and read the messages the KGC left behind. And more than that, only Sentinels and those trained by them know how to find the symbols in their messages, because the symbols and messages of the KGC aren't just sitting there printed on a map. In fact, they're not printed at all. According to Brewer, to make sure these messages would be around for centuries, they carved them into tree trunks and etched them into rocks and even put into deliberate mistakes in certain tombstones. When it came to hiding the Confederate treasure, the KGC supposedly used the best hiding place of all, right in plain sight. And above all, the supposed KGC code relied heavily on biblical chapter and verse, which was chosen because all its members would have known it well. Cryptic carving might direct the sentinel to a verse in the Bible, and the interpretation of that would further guide the sentinel or even a knowledgeable treasure hunter to another symbol, another coordinate, another step on the path to the hidden wealth. Of course, the very complexity of the system is also one of its greatest flaws. Sentinels, like everybody else, grow old and eventually die. If they die without passing on their special knowledge, the knowledge goes to the grave with them. And another flaw in that system is that trees age as well. The carving that was at eye level in 1865 can be dozens or more feet higher a few years later. And then trees die and they get cut down, which is why the KGC symbol carvers often shows sturdy, long-lived, smooth-bark trees like holly for their messages. But there was something undeniably compelling about watching a treasure hunter and KGC expert like Bob Brewer go about his work. He studied a mark on a tree that most of us would overlook and decided that once we're at that 8-sided gazebo, the symbol of a ghost means we're now looking for a specific grave. Think that's confusing? Yes, it is quite confusing. That was the intention of it. But this cryptic game of hide and seek is what makes it one of the greatest historical mysteries of all time. So many of the symbols can be interpreted in so many different ways. There's always a possibility that all we're really looking at is a blank slate onto which anything can be read. But using his ability to interpret KGC symbols along with a mysterious map coordinate template that was once owned by a Confederate soldier, in which he overlays onto old maps, Brewer has found treasure. He's found as much as $200,000 worth of treasure over the past few decades. And he's convinced he's going to be able to find some more. Along the way, he's also found more about the role the KGC may have played in the lives of his grandfather and uncle, who showed him his first treasure tree when he was just a boy. When it comes to the actual treasure, what further complicates matters is the possibility that this gold was buried in public cemeteries such as Green Hill Cemetery in Danville, the object of intense scrutiny by seekers of Confederate gold. Green Hill Cemetery could well be a prime hiding place for the $200,000 that vanished a century ago. We talked about that when we talked about the Confederate treasure. Danville was actually the last capital of the Confederacy. And Davis's treasure train was there for a period of time. In fact, on one outing, Brewer followed a trail of KGC codes and symbols, noting the letter H carved into a few places. He insisted they were looking for a heart, that H stood for heart. They kept looking around with no hearts. Brewer kept insisting, look for the heart. Well, by that time, most folks thought he might be crazy as a loon until they pulled an old map of the cemetery and, using Brewer's template, saw a heart shape in the cemetery's roads. And from there, Brewer led folks to a specific grave, which they then scanned with ground-penetrating radar. A GPR, or ground-penetrating radar unit, does exactly what its name says: scans the territory underneath the surface of the earth and records the bounce back to the signal, searching for anomalies. And sure enough, at the grave in Green Hill Cemetery, there was an anomaly. The mass in the grave didn't conform to expectations. So what was inside that mass? Was it a hidden cache of gold? Jefferson Davis's frozen head, perhaps? Without exhuming the grave, there was just no way to find out. And because Green Hill is a public cemetery, digging it up wasn't open to, that just wasn't going to happen. Obviously, most folks don't think we'd be finding the lost Confederate gold the first time out. But it did raise the question, was the Confederate treasure simply stolen, or was it hidden by the KGC as part of a large, complex plan for when the South was going to rise again? Till the treasure hunter like Brewer finds definitive proof, we're probably never going to know. After all, the only people who really know are long dead. But in the end, there was one detail that was unarguable. There will always be those searching for treasure. I mean, let's not forget, we're a country founded on legend and myth. We love them, especially legends about treasure. Looking for treasure isn't just part of being an American, it is America. And at least some of the rebel gold is still out there somewhere. But the bottom line is, the only reason the treasures remained hidden for more than 150 years because it was put there by experts. If it was easy to find, it would have been found a long time ago. And as time marches on, the people with the necessary knowledge, like Bob Brewer, become fewer and farther between. Well, there's a lot of signs and symbols across this country. One location I find especially fascinating is what's known as Georgia Guidestones. It's also referred to as America's Stonehenge. What if I told you that America has its own Stonehenge? These giant stones were set on a hillside outside of all places, Atlanta, Georgia, in 1980. Now, whoever did it remains unknown, as does the monument's true purpose. In fact, other than a $500,000 price tag, almost nothing is known about the stones at all. They're composed of 119 tons of solid granite and have coded messages that are engraved onto them in the world's 8 most commonly spoken languages. These rectangular pillars are also precisely crafted to track astrological and solar cycles. There's some who interpret these messages here as a sign of the end of days. Others theorize that they're a call for genocide on a massive scale. So, what do the messages say? Who built them? Why are they located on a remote hillside in Georgia? And of course, what they're intended to guide us toward. If they're guide stones, they must be guiding us toward something. Well, one thing you can do is take a look at the raw numbers to get a sense of how massive a project this was. The height is 19 feet 3 inches at its tallest point. Height of the 4 basic stones are 16 feet 4 inches. Weight's 237,746 pounds. That's about 119 tons, don't you know? The capstone has interesting dimensions: 9 feet 8 inches long, 6 feet 6 inches wide, 1 foot 7 inches thick, and weighs 24,832 pounds. Total volume of granite that was used in this unusual construction, 951 cubic feet. And it cost $500,000. It was not just a simple pile of rocks. And the how and why of the guide stones, why they were built, how they were built, have never been answered. But there's one thing that is known: the monument just didn't appear out of nowhere. On a summer day in 1979, a man using the alias R.C. Christian shows up at the Elberton Granite Finishing Company, presents very detailed and specific plans, and tells us he wants to build the Georgia Guidestones. Only detail we have about the man is he was balding with a fringe of white hair, had an accent suggested he was from one of the Plains states, and he had money. Oh, yes, he had a lot of money. Only thing he absolutely demanded was that he remain completely anonymous. And to this day, nobody's been able to figure out who he actually was. What Christian commissioned was no small undertaking. In fact, even with as deep a history of working with granite as Albertson had, they never encountered anything like the request from R.C. Christian. In fact, even if there were nothing more to the Georgia Guidestones and the stones themselves, the monument would be exceptionally impressive. Testament to the skills and abilities of the granite company R.C. Christian hired. But there's a lot more to the guidestones than the granite slabs. Some say it's mysterious, others say it's sinister. The guidestones were unveiled during a public ceremony in 1980. Controversial immediately, supporters like Yoko Ono praised the message as a stirring call to rational thinking. But opponents attacked them, called them the Ten Commandments of the Antichrist. In addition to the messages written on them, the Georgia Guidestones are oriented to the stars. The east and west corners of the monument track sunrise and sunset. A slot cut in one of the slabs marks the winter and summer solstices. A shaft drilled through the central stone marks Polaris, the North Star. And a slit cut through the capstone marks perfect noon. So what's the message on the stones? Well, first you have to know that each message appears in English and Spanish and Swahili and Hindi and Hebrew and Arabic and Chinese and Russian, the 8 most widely spoken languages on earth, which means the 10 lines on each slab are intended for all the world's inhabitants. As for the messages themselves, the first 9, reading up from the bottom, seem to be a benign call to higher thinking. Don't be a cancer on the earth. Seek harmony. Balance personal rights with social duties. Avoid petty laws. Resolve international conflicts in a world court. Protect people with fair laws. Rule with a reason. Unite humanity with a new language. And guide reproduction wisely. But it's the topmost directive on the stones that seems to stop people cold. Well, human population under 500 million would certainly be more in balance with nature, but to achieve a population under 500 million would mean that more than 7 billion people would have to die or be killed. That directive makes some believe the Guidestones are calling for the mass murder of billions of innocent people, global genocide that would kill the vast majority of the human race. So, which interpretation is accurate? Or is there another interpretation entirely? The only way to find out is to decode who or what is behind the creation of the Guidestones themselves. No question, though, whoever built the Georgia Guidestones, they were determined to protect their anonymity. So to find out more about the mysterious R.C. Christian, researchers began to talk to Guidestone historian Raymond Wiley, co-author of the book, The Georgia Guidestones, America's Most Mysterious Monument. According to Wiley, the pseudonym R.C. Christian is a clue in and of itself. Fairly blatant one. It harkens back to the 15th century physician and mystic named Christian Rosenkreutz. The idea of the Rose Cross and the secretive organization known as the Rosicrucians. Now, people think that the Freemasons are fascinating, but the Rosicrucians are light years beyond the Freemasons, according to many. Christian Rosenkreutz was said to have founded the secretive Rosicrucian Society in Germany in the early 15th century, but some dispute whether that man ever lived at all. Some say he's not even real. Others say he's more than one person. For the members of the society, Rosenkreutz was a doctor who had spent a lifetime gathering what he'd call sacred knowledge, studying ancient Turkish, Sufi, and Persian past toward understanding, as well as Western medical knowledge. He supposedly traveled through the Middle East, being instructed by masters of ancient wisdom. When he returned, he supposedly founded his own church to pass on the learning to make sure it didn't die with him. So at first, all the members of the Rosicrucians were doctors. Each one took an oath to heal the sick without payment, maintain the secrets of the fellowship, and find a replacement for Rosenkreutz before he died. And that sacred knowledge is said to include elements of alchemy and psychic manipulation. Modern Rosicrucians are believed to have even been able to tap the ultimate power of the human mind. Some think the sect has evolved and they now seek to protect and guide humanity away from its own destruction. Others have accused the Rosicrucians of being out and out evil. And to be clear, there are, in fact, offshoots of Rosicrucians everywhere. Symbol of that church, a cross with a white rose at its center. They call it a rosy cross. And the R and the C from the word rosy cross undoubtedly represent the founder's last name, Rosenkreutz. And some believe they're linked to the R and the C in the Guidestones benefactor pseudonym, R.C. Christian. And if you look at the Georgia Guidestones from above, they resemble, believe it or not, a cross with a rose affixed. So is that the answer? Do the Georgia Guidestones serve as a beacon to followers of an all but forgotten religion that's dedicated to unlocking hidden powers of the mind? Well, there's a lot that say that's not the craziest idea they ever heard. I mean, when you ever join a fraternity or sorority, the appeal and the power of secret knowledge is always tantalizing. In fact, people join secret societies in order to be part of something special, something that will set them apart from the rest of society. But in the wrong hands, this desire for secret knowledge can lead to something far less attractive. Something that, according to journalist and Rosicrucian investigator Van Smith, might even be evil. Well, according to Smith, the Georgia Guidestones were built explicitly to survive the apocalypse. More importantly, he believes this apocalypse is going to be man-made. In fact, with the commandment that the population be reduced to 500 million people and that 7 billion of us are going to have to die, he says that when it comes to the Guidestones, what it really is humanity's tombstone. And to prove the point, he insists that the Rosicrucians have a mastery of psychic abilities, including psychokinesis, the ability to move objects with their mind, astral projection, the ability to travel vast distances in time and space by projecting your thoughts, and even the ability to control the minds of others. And it's that last one, controlling the minds of others, that Smith says the most potentially dangerous of all Rosicrucian abilities. In fact, he believes it's what he played a part in one of the most notorious of all American assassinations. 1968 murder of Senator Robert F. Kennedy by Sirhan Sirhan. Smith believes that Sirhan assassinated Senator Kennedy not of his own volition, but under direct psychic guidance from secret Rosicrucian masters. And his proof of this? He points to the ramblings of Sirhan's diaries and the fact the killer was a Rosicrucian himself. Well, a lot of folks disagree with Smith. Sure, Sirhan was technically a Rosicrucian, but he became one by mail order. I mean, frankly, you can even be a bride by mail order. So mail order really doesn't count in the minds of many. And it doesn't seem as if Sirhan represented anybody or anything but himself. If you look at the historical record, during his trial, 5 different mental health experts all testified that Sirhan was a paranoid schizophrenic. So the idea of the Rosicrucians somehow controlling his mind, mentally manipulating him to shoot Senator Kennedy, well, to a lot of folks, that's just a preposterous idea. But it is worth looking at those mail order ads. They appeared in the back pages of science fiction and hobbyist magazines in the 50s and 60s. There, among other odd advertisements, were some for a group calling themselves the Rosicrucians. And the advertised mix of the promise of mysterious powers and the ability to unleash those powers for your own benefit was just a sort of nuttiness that could attract a lot of applications and membership fees of the foolish, the young, and the gullible. And even someone lonely and the criminally disturbed. So how do you find out the truth about the Rosicrucians? Well, the best way to do that, frankly, would be go talk to a Rosicrucian yourself. Very first thing Reverend Betty Benner wanted you to know about Rosicrucianism was if somebody tells you they're Rosicrucians, they're not. This is a religion that's supposedly out to conquer the world, or at least win converts, and its real members won't even tell you they're real members. Well, according to Reverend Benner, true Rosicrucians perceive the belief as a quest, a pursuit, one that persists throughout one's life. According to Benner, they identified themselves as students of the philosophy. And that's important. Reverend Benner made it clear that when interviewed that Rosicrucians aspire to improvement, to grow, to the development of their spiritual and mental powers on an individual basis. And the model for these pursuits and studies is none other than Jesus. She pointed out that there lies the great conflict between well-established churches, and particularly the Roman Catholic Church and the Rosicrucians. If a church teaches that Jesus was divine and Son of God, then that's that. We can follow such a figure, but we can't aspire to become a figure like him. But, according to the Reverend, if Jesus was a man, one who applied himself and developed his spirit and his mind to an almost unbelievable degree, that's something else altogether. We can all apply ourselves to developing our own skills and abilities, some of which she believes may be almost godlike in their reach and power. She said, "We do believe in the powers of the mind, and we teach that as you believe, so shall it be unto you," referring in a very different way to the possibility of advanced mental powers and capabilities. So what about those using these powers to impose Rosicrucian will on the world? According to Reverend Benner, that doesn't sound like a true Rosicrucian at all. This is a very individualistic belief system, she said, imposing one individual's will on another or on billions of others is the very antithesis of Rosicrucianism. And she didn't take Smith's Sirhan conspiracy theory any more seriously than anybody else did. did offer an interesting take on whether or not the Rosicrucians are behind the creation and construction of Georgia Guidestones. Said it's more likely that's an individual who studied their teachings and philosophy. Well, far from being a secret mind-controlled cabal of the sort that Smith so deeply feared, Reverend Benner's portrait of Rosicrucianism is of a loosely connected group of seekers after higher truths. One of these seekers may have found his higher truth best expressed in the creation of Georgia Guidestones. Be interesting to see what the true meaning of this interesting construction might well be. Well, according to author and filmmaker Jay Weidner, the Rosicrucians are not the only ones out to murder 7 billion fellow humans. They're actively trying to warn us of the large threats the entire world faces. According to a statement he made in 2011, the threat was of a massive cycle of solar storms, possibly capable of disrupting or even destroying the global communication network and the power grid. And of course, we had to bring about the collapse of civilization. Weidner's concerns regarding a 2012 solar storm cycle killing off most of us didn't come true any more than the Mayan calendar predictions of the end of the world. 2012 was far from the best year this old planet's ever seen, but it was also far from the last year, or as 2020 showed, even the worst year. But that wouldn't change the possibility of R.C. Christian in 1979 might have believed the coming cycle of solar storms was going to bring a dramatic end to the world as we know it. And for that matter, University of Georgia astronomer Boris Magnani points out to us that the peak current cycle of the solar explosion was due in 2012 or 2013. Not that he believed that even a catastrophic coronal mass ejection, a huge ball of energy cast out of the sun, and if conditions are right, thrust onto a collision course with the Earth, would bring an end to life as we know it. Far likelier than that, he said, would be the impact of an asteroid on the Earth. Just such an impact of an asteroid or a portion of a comet that was said to brought an end to the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. At the same time, we live in such near total dependence on advanced technology, even a minimal disruption of the power grid and communications network would be catastrophic, if not truly cataclysmic or apocalyptic. Turn off the electricity, turn off the phones, turn off the internet, what happens? We'll find out very quickly just how fragile the veneer civilization is when you take away the lights, refrigeration, air conditioning, telephone, and all the rest. In the case of a major regional disaster such as a storm or an earthquake, neighboring systems can step in and offer assistance, but if you take out the entire grid, it is a major disaster of apocalyptic proportions. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be back tomorrow and talk about more mysteries. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening.